believe.
Well, the thing is, people don't act based off of a lack of belief. They act because they have very well-defined beliefs, stated or not, that are leading to their actions. So when they rail against religion or speak against your certainty about religion, that in itself is an implicit admission that they have this atheistic belief that is, guiding their definitive actions. So that's where I think the agnosticism turns into atheism when it is translated into some sort of act that is highly atheist, anti-theist, or whatever.
But here's the problem. Agnosticism is the claim to be indecision, but they've already decided that facts don't necessitate referencing God, which is not indecision.
Isn't it the opposite of God of the gaps? Isn't it opposite of God of the gaps for the atheists? They're like, you're busy inserting God. They're busy saying, I'm a lacktheist. And so you're busy saying, and they're, from their point of view, they're saying, well, you're just filling in God. They're saying, I don't know the ground of objects. I don't know what underlies this. I just accept it. And then, like you say, Darth, when they're pressed to the ropes, they then say something like, I have no evidence, or I lack a belief. Well, it's because they're presented with a world of objects that they're not supposing a ground to it. And so when a theist comes along and supposes it, they're busy like, watch the theist insert this gap here.
What you have just described actually constitutes now the denial of the creator-creature distinction. It's not simply one of withholding judgment. Are you trying to represent that atheists on the internet, for the most part, are just merely only withholding judgment as to the existence of God?
I think a lot of them come to it that way, that they're raised in a secular household. It's not. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the whole swath of atheists. I won't.
Okay,
I'm speaking.
The atheists that call themselves Lacktheists. Well, atheism is a lack of belief. They're trying to represent atheism as simply being they're withholding judgment as to the existence or non-existence of God. Are we clear on that point?
Right, I got that, and I would say I accept that as seemingly described where they're coming from.
Okay, now, does it hold water when we examine it? No, it does not.
Yeah, but the critique comes into how. How does it not hold water, right? Without you getting upset and wardening someone off.
Okay, they are claiming that they don't use the word neutral, but they're saying is, oh, well, we're just not convinced that God exists. They're trying to present themselves as having withholding judgment as to the existence or non-existence of God. But have they withheld judgment? Oh, absolutely not. Because they believe that it is not necessary to reference the necessity of God as the precondition.
Right, because they're busy saying, like, you're inserting it. It's the God of the gaps.
Therefore, their claim to withholding judgment is simply a misrepresentation of their real.
No, they see it as a gap. They literally see it as a gap. You're busy saying they don't. You're busy saying they don't.
Do they categorically believe in the dependence of facts upon God?
Not in all cases. Some of them don't get deep that far.
We're talking about Lacktheists. Do Lacktheists positively believe in the utter dependence and derivational status of facts upon God? No, they do not. They consequently, therefore, believe.
Why are you answering for them?
Intelligible. I'm not answering for them. I'm showing you what is necessarily entailed by their position. So they're not undecided. They're pretending to be undecided.
You say that. You say that.
Non-committal. They are committal because they believe in the independence of facts without God.
Right, now look, once again, you're ascribing this, you're saying this, and granted you argue in these things more so than probably the regular, but you're busy, look, from my point of view, you're busy inserting their answer and telling me that's what they answer. So I'll take your stat.
They do that.
Okay, but now you're entailing something along. Once again, if I have a world and there's gaps in my knowledge, and you're busy saying it's God, and I'm busy saying, look, let's just keep it a gap for the time being and see what else we can assess. You could put me in a I don't want to come down on it either way. Sorry?
What you just said is precisely what you're doing. You're representing the position as simply being non-committal.
Yeah. So I'm talking to you. You're busy stereotyping of them.
What you just said, does it represent being non-committal?
Yeah, it represents a non-committal, meaning I don't want anything to fill in the gap. You're saying it doesn't. I say it does.
You can't be non-committal.
In what respect can I not be non-committal? I don't see...
You can't be non-committal because either you will believe in the necessity of referencing God as the precondition of all facts, or you will not believe that.
Right. Okay, so on the turn of the phrase...
Is that true?
I disagree with that. No, I say that's not the case. I can suspend this.
I gave you a true dichotomy.
Well, okay, I was trying to flip this to you then. Okay, so let me...
Do you know who Alex Malpass?
Yes, I know Alex Malpass. I've talked to him.
Okay, Alex Malpass, who is a respected PhD in philosophy.
Which I am not him. Go ahead.
And he is an atheist, and he said a true dichotomy is true by definition. If we say something is either A or not A, it's true by definition. Either they positively believe in the necessity of facts referencing God or not. You reject
right, no, okay. Granting over the not.
Don't overtalk me. Now, I gave you a true dichotomy. Do you accept that?
I don't think those are the only options in the true dichotomy, so no. It's incomplete dichotomy. No, you're forcing a dichotomy.
Okay, is A or not A true dichotomy?
That sounds like a true dichotomy.
Okay, now I'm going to plug in a value for A.
Okay, God sees you shit. God knows how you shit. That's the first value, and then God sees all things. God knows you're shitting. Oh, of course.
I'm going to have to mute you.
Okay, bye. Let me just go, because you're going to use this wardening thing.
What a deceiver.
Okay, bye. And ladies and gentlemen, now you can see just what he was saying. And so I'll follow up. Once again, he's trying to say, okay, A or not A is a true dichotomy. So he's trying to insert the idea that, if you're not for God, if you're not for X, then you're necessarily against X, right? And then he's using something like the causal relation, that which grounds all being. And so he's basically saying, look, either God grounds all being or he doesn't. It's a true dichotomy. And I'm busy talking not about what grounds it, right? I'm talking about the gaps in what is suspected to ground it. I'm talking about the gaps in what is suspected to ground it. So he's not exactly even addressing what it is I was pointing out. And he's busy going to be addressing something else. So let's dip back in, see what happens.
Necessary precondition of all facts that are not God, or you don't believe that. That's a true dichotomy.
So, I think what they would say is that, the true dichotomy is the ontological state of affairs, that either God is, whatever you said, necessary or whatever, or he's not. That is a true dichotomy.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about their belief.
But you're saying the belief in the positive.
Either they believe that the Eiffel Tower stands in Paris, or they don't believe that.
So, what about the question of
is that a true dichotomy?
What is it? Eiffel Tower standing in Paris.
Either they believe Eiffel Tower stands in Paris, or they don't. Yes, it is. It is a true dichotomy. They do not want the true dichotomy that I present to stand because then it implicates them as not being non-committal like they pretend to be.
So how does that apply to something that's like less known, like there being an even number of particles in the universe?
This is a category error, because you can be non-committal because the even or an odd number of particles in the universe is not of a transcendental nature, meaning that you derive and depend upon it. Okay, this is a category error. You can, for example, we saw in one of the recent atheist schmearing show where the guy pulls out a group of cards. He goes, I'm holding an even or an odd number of playing cards. Which is it? This is a category error. You can be non-committal toward many things. Can you be non-committal toward everything? No. And you can't be non-committal about God. Now, do they reject that? Of course they do. Why? Is because they don't affirm God. Then if non-committal is not an option, then they're going to have to defend the not God position, but they don't want to do that. So because they don't want to acknowledge God existing by affirming God, they don't want to defend that God does not exist. So what they do is they verbalize some state of being non-committal. But they're not non-committal because all I can show them is, do you positively believe that God is the necessary precondition of all facts that are not God?
See, now, he's rambling and I'm still muted. So just to let you guys know, I'm recording this video for you guys.
Some facts are real without the necessity of referencing God.
And so he wants to import all facts as a necessity for God, which then any internal, like the distinction between God not being Satan or being Lucifer, or being the evil or the evil cause, is presented back to them.
That proposition is true, which means what they do affirm necessarily entails the denial of God.
See, and of course, we're talking over each other, so it makes sense.
And so they're going to argue as the day is long so that they don't have to defend what their real position is. They're digging a moat around the castle because they know the castle is fatally flawed. So they dig a moat around the castle so the castle cannot be accessed, okay, to be brought down. And the moat is simply Lacktheism. I lack belief.
In the chat, they say that Lucky is not an atheist. I think he's kind of like one of those mystical mystics or whatever, kind of Far East Hinduized, but I think technically that's not an atheist. But I may be wrong.
I mean, I know him. Well, I've debated him and gone through the whole line with him. He says that he holds to all positions of religiosity. So he's a Buddhist and a Christian. But what he actually means is, when you break it down, he doesn't know anything. He has no framework by which he's evaluating any claim. That's what Lucky is. And he uses like sophistry to try to avoid answering those questions. He's well annoying.
In the Far East, there is no distinction. All is just one. And eventually, truth mixes with lies. That's why the Western worldview is preferable if you're going to try to discover anything such as truth, assuming you still believe in truth with such a muddled, mystical worldview.
You see, when you're dealing with an interlocutor who holds a position on an issue, but they misrepresent what their position is because they want to insulate themselves from having to defend that position, then the person who is the opponent of the interlocutor is at a distinct disadvantage because the other person is not being truthful about their position. You know, Jeffrey J. Lauder, the founder of Internet Infidels, one of the largest sites for atheism, himself is a staunch atheist. And he says atheists continue to shoot themselves in the foot because they cannot come up with a consensus or an agreement as to what atheism means. Either atheism is the denial of God, or they want to claim that it's just some ambiguous umbrella category of non-theism. And then they come up with this stupid bifurcation of, I'm an agnostic atheist. I mean, it's pathetic. The amount of human hours of having to deal with this kabuki dance of them misrepresenting what they really believe. Look, they've been at least effective in the sense that they dug the moat deep and wide because they know the castle is fatally flawed.
Right. And I think that they have a real fallacy in that they don't want things to become so set and dogmatic. They want all the possibilities to be open without dogma, rules, or truth. And that seems like it's good on paper, but eventually they can't explore any truth of anything because things are just so muddled and mixed up. You just get stuck. Without truth, definitively and clearly defined, you have no action anyway. So it's just like they end up shooting themselves in the foot by saying we want everything to be possible other than God, but then they have so many possibilities they can't go anywhere.
Look, let's take Massimo Pallucci. He has 2 earned PhDs, one in the philosophy of science, the other in biology. He's a staunch atheist. He's defended atheists at a professional level. When I questioned him about how there's no God, he would not come out and defend that God does not, in fact, exist. His response was like that of your average teenage atheist on Discord saying, I don't have a reason to believe in God. Okay? Well, that is trying to convey that he's kind of non-committal. But when you say, I don't have a reason to believe in God, that is the equivalent of saying all of the facts around me do not necessitate referencing the necessity of God. That is not a non-committal position, but they use verbiage and phraseologies to convey that they're non-committal. But they're not non-committal. We need to call these atheists out for the fraudulent misrepresentation of their position.
And they could prove you wrong by simply offering a viable alternative, but they don't. They just want to tear down the certain worldview, the one that has conviction, to act based on what they feel is true and take away their certainty. It's a negative worldview that seems to take and steal rather than reveal or construct, anything that they're going to be open about. Are they going to be open about how debauched and murderous this atheist world is going to be? No, but as long as they can get rid of this hated God, they don't care.
All right, I got some stuff I got to do. I'll be back. But I'm sorry, I am not going to stop confronting these deceptive, duplicitous atheists. I'm going to expose their duplicity, their deception. They're not non-committal. They don't simply lack belief in God, okay? They believe God does not exist, and they don't want to defend it.
Well, I have a question real quick, Dart. Is saying, if an atheist were to say, I define atheist as not believing in God, that God doesn't exist, is that the right definition?
Atheism is the position that God does not exist. Okay?
Right.
Atheism is understood as the negation of theism.
Right.
Now, because atheists don't want to have to defend their position, they want to misrepresent atheism by focusing that it's a psychological state.
Let's see if that's still picking up. Anyway, so I was going to jump in once again as a closing note. So the guy does this. It's his MO, right? Meaning, as soon as you, like initially you guys probably heard, he was asking me to Steele Man him, but then he said he wanted me to repeat him the other guy helped me out. He said I'm circuitous, or like a circle. I eventually get around to the topic, and it does. That's true. So I got back in and I tried to hit the more exacting points. But problematically, is that if you actually try to have, take a position, throw something back, throw something in the fight, right? He will repeat himself. He'll say you're cutting him off. He'll do so enough belabored such that the topic itself, like that period of time when you're holding an idea, roughly 5-7 seconds, something like that, parenthetically, for it to vanish, then he'll ask something of you again. So he's busy repeating, he's busy doubling, quadrupling down, and he doesn't seem to want to actually have a good fight. He's busy just controlling the moat around his castle. He doesn't want to actually have a good fight. Anyway, that's my belief on the guy. And let's see if there's any more juice here, or otherwise we'll wrap this little micro video up here. I'm going to the bathroom anyway.
It does not necessitate God denialism, although most anti-theists are God deniers.
If the narrative of God never existed, would you still have a narrative of God?
What do you mean if the narrative of God never, what does that even mean?
A concept of God.
Well, from my worldview, that's impossible, because God
hypothetically speaking, though, that's why I'm asking.
No, I reject the notion of the hypothetical, like I would reject a hypothetical gold-plated square triangle.
I don't accept you rejecting the hypothetical.
Well, maybe with a little bit of therapy, you'll come to forgive me.
It sounds like you're asking, would we come up with God without this being revealed to us by other people or God himself? I don't know.
See, here's the problem. Here's
would
the problem.
Darth still hold the same narrative?
The problem with your question is, I don't think you have enough background information. So, for example, right, everybody believes in some regularities. Would you agree? Jet, would you agree that everybody believes that some things are regular?
I suppose.
Wait, hold on a second. I'm making an important
You're the
point
one
here.
making the claim of an
Jet, listen to me.
Right?
I'm trying to make an important point. Do you agree with me that everyone, unless they're brain damaged or insane, believes that in this world that there is real regularity? Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
It's a no-brainer, Jet. Of course, everybody believes in regularity. Otherwise, they couldn't speak at all, because in order to speak meaningfully and intelligibly, it requires identity over time. I couldn't say the sky is blue if the ontological identity of skyness and blueness didn't persist over time.
What was wrong with my hypothetical question?
Because I'm trying to explain to you why it's a problem, okay?